Hey guys, I'm Chris Buck and a very warm welcome to Friday Fretworks, and this week, what really makes for a great guitar. It's one of life's little mysteries. Why are some guitars great? One that inspires you to write and perform and play better music, while another that may ostensibly look identical, perhaps roll off the same production line, or maybe even the same day, may leave you cold. For a process that's been continually refined and distilled over the last 70 or so years, electric guitar manufacture still seems like a frustratingly arbitrary and inconsistent process. Some guitars turn out great, some not so great, and nobody can conclusively, definitively, legitimately tell you why. I guess ultimately, the principal component, wood, is a natural material, and as such will have variances or discrepancies or inconsistency from piece to piece, but of course there are those who swear blind that a guitar's wood, or its kind of core component, has little to no effect on its electric tone, in which case why do they vary so wildly? I thought in today's episode it'd be interesting to try and condense my near enough 20 years experience of playing guitars, during which time I've been fortunate to play a hell of a lot of guitars, into 3 core points which I believe are the 3 kind of fundamental keystones of a great guitar. Firstly, and perhaps most tangibly, playability. Even the best guitar ever made will sound terrible if it doesn't play in a way which inspires you to play. And to that end, it's worth noting that I've played some incredibly expensive guitars over the years. Didn't play particularly well. I've played some very reasonably priced, maybe even cheap guitars that were beautiful to play. Now, of course, a good setup will go a hell of a long way, but if a guitar isn't fundamentally constructed in a way which lends itself to playing well, you are not going to be able to get the best out of it. But what constitutes good playability? Now, of course, the answer will vary from player to player, whether you like a lighter gauge string or a heavier gauge string, smaller frets or bigger frets, a more vintage style radius or a flatter, maybe even compound radius, which changes across the fingerboard. Knowing what you like is crucial to getting the best out of a guitar. There are, of course, any number of variables in a guitar's playability, but if it isn't fundamentally well constructed in the first place, you're onto a loser. It's not going to inspire you to play. A good example being my first ever guitar, the Squier Affinity Telecaster. If that wasn't such a great little guitar, not even for the money, don't need to add that caveat, it was just a great instrument. If it wasn't too effortless to play, it categorically wouldn't have inspired me in the way in which it did, and I probably wouldn't be sat here talking to you about guitar. Now, out of all the guitars that I own, undoubtedly the easiest to play is my PRS Hollow Body 2. Now, I actually made a video on this guitar relatively recently, which I shall link to above, but suffice to say it's a guitar that I don't play anywhere near enough, presumably because it's too busy playing itself, but no less than we've come to expect from PRS. Its build quality and its playability are truly second to none. It is absolutely incredible. It really is an effortless instrument to play, and gives credence to Paul Reed-Smith's theory of marginal gain. The idea that small yet significant improvements across the board will yield a better final product than simply trying to improve one area to a commensurate degree. But that's not to say that you have to play PRS money to get great playability. Another guitar that I've spoken about ad nauseum in the past is, of course, my 40th anniversary Squier Jazzmaster. A guitar that at present will probably set you back somewhere in the region of about £300, yet is an absolutely fantastic guitar. It plays beautifully and really is an inspiring instrument to play. Ultimately, if it's well constructed, the neck's straight, the tuner's efficient, the nut's well cut, there's no sharp fret edges, and the neck is connected to the body, you're probably going to have a perfectly workable guitar. Secondly, and a fairly major factor in an electric guitar, it's electronics. Now, of course, people will naturally gravitate towards the pickups. It's one of the simplest, most effective changes you can make in an electric guitar, but simply making sure that the electronics are up to spec across the board really is essential to making sure that you can get the best out of a guitar's potential. Of course, there's super obvious stuff like making sure nothing's crackling or you haven't got a dodgy input jack, but even as something as relatively simple as checking the value of your pots or your potentiometers really does have a marked impact on your guitar's tone. For example, my 2001 Les Paul, I spent the better part of 15 years trying to understand why that guitar sounded so dull and so dark, only to find out that as stock it had come fitted with 300k pots, which over the years had actually drifted closer to about 250k. Compare that to the 500k pots that came in the Lewis and the Standards of the late 50s, a tone which I'd been chasing for years. It really did go a long way towards explaining why that guitar sounded so muddy and so dark. Yet a simple change to the tune of about £40, an upgrade in the pots, really did make such a difference to that guitar. It sounded like someone had taken a blanket off it. That said, pickups are undoubtedly important, and having a set of pickups in your guitar which not only complement what you're trying to play, but the guitar that they're in, crucially, is undoubtedly a huge part of its plugged-in tone. It's worth pointing out that as much as there is a huge market for aftermarket pickups, I have my own signature set with Radio Shop, plug, if you're looking for a set of Strat pickups. It's also worth pointing out that a great, expensive set of aftermarket pickups are not going to compensate for a bad guitar. I've put expensive pickups in decidedly average guitars in the past, and lo and behold, you end up with an average guitar with expensive pickups in it. It really doesn't compensate to that degree. If, however, you have a great guitar that you feel has more to offer, that's the time to experiment with aftermarket pickups. When you get a guitar that feels like it's working in conjunction with, as opposed to in opposition to, its pickups, really is a magical feeling. And undoubtedly one of the best examples I've ever come across of this was on an all-gold 1955 Les Paul I played in France a few years ago. Unplugged, that guitar had an acoustic, airy quality, which I was incredibly pleased to see was reflected in its electric sound as well. Those old, slightly microphonic P90s really felt as though they were just amplifying the guitar's natural acoustic quality, the culmination of which was a truly wonderful instrument. And undoubtedly, the electronics were a huge part of that. And last, but by absolutely no means least, resonance. Now, I guess everything I've touched on to this point has been relatively standard stuff, but one thing which continually divides people, and probably will until long after my time on this mortal coil, is whether a guitar's natural resonance, by which I mean its kind of unplugged acoustic qualities, have any bearing on its electric qualities. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that every guitar that I've ever played that has felt resonant and lively and exciting unplugged has felt resonant, lively and exciting when it's plugged in. Whether it's perceived or psychosomatic, I honestly don't know, but all I can say conclusively is that any guitar I've ever forged a meaningful connection with on any level, it's had a natural airiness and resonance unplugged, and this really seems to be reflected to some degree in its electric tone. It's something that's intrigued me for years, and as such, when I had a chance to ask Paul Reed-Smith a question a few years back as part of a PRS promo video with Tyler Larson, it was exactly that I asked him.
My question would be, how important do you think an electric guitar's acoustic resonance is to its overall electric sound?
Well, Chris, you've just asked the number one question. A pickup is a microphone. If you have a guitar that has no bass and no mid-range and it's all high-end, something's taking the bass and the mid-range away. If you have a guitar that's really bassy that has no high-end, something's taking the high-end away. Guitars are subtractive. The string is doing all the frequencies, just doing bass, mid-range, and treble, and it doesn't weigh anything. The high E string is a couple of grams, so when you have a string that's that lightweight, anything that touches it affects its tone. Look, you can make a guitar string sound like a sitar, and then the pickup's going to pick up the sitar sound on every note, right? So it's not so easy. It is the argument. I've based my entire career on, first and foremost, the guitar is an acoustic guitar, and that's important. Look, you can check how good a guitar is with a stopwatch. A guitar that rings for 10 seconds is not as good as a guitar that rings for 45 seconds, period, because something's eating the energy up. And my experience is you can beat the crap out of the guitar and make something work, but you're better off with something that rings. Just my take.
Now that answer, as good as it was, opens up another kettle of fish in regards to tone woods, whether certain woods are better for making guitars than others, whether lighter guitars sound better than heavier guitars, whether a guitar's hardware has a marked effect on its tone. That's an entirely different video in its own right there. But ultimately, I would say that in my personal experience of the thousands of guitars that I've played over the years, I would agree with Paul. A guitar that rings under your fingers sounds better than a guitar that doesn't. Speaking of guitars that ring like a bell, I'm going to play you out now on my Punichi Gold Top. But as ever, thank you very much for watching. I'm Chris Buck, this is Friday Fretworks. Please subscribe, hit the bell icon if you haven't already. Checking the kind of analytics on my channel, a huge percentage of the people that watch me every week aren't actually subscribed, so if you could hit that subscribe button, that'd be amazing. And I'll see you next week for another episode of Friday Fretworks. Cheers guys, take care, see you soon.